Hi everyone! I am so fortunate to be here today with the wonderful Melissa Ambrosini to chat about her brand new book, Mastering Your Mean Girl, which you can see I have clearly gotten very into, which officially launched just a few days ago. So thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. It's so delightful to be with you.
Honored to be with you and in your presence, and so grateful the universe has brought us together.
So for those who don't know you yet, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to get to where you are now?
Well, how long have we got? Lucky we've got some time. I share all of this in my book, obviously, as you know, but I'll give you a little rundown, a little nutshell version. So today I am an author, speaker, and self love teacher. I create online products and programs to help inspire women, and I run the goddess groups and live events and workshops. And I wrote this book, as you said before. So, but I haven't always done this. 6 years ago, I was in hospital with a whole host of health issues. I ended up in hospital because I burnt the candle at both ends, and there was no candle left to burn. Um, when I ended up in hospital, I had adrenal fatigue and thyroid issues, and a whole host of health issues. But what actually put me in hospital was my entire immune system shut down. And I ended up with the cold sore virus really, really badly. I'd never had a cold sore before in my life, but I had them all over my face, like up under, even under my eyes, in my mouth, and down my throat. And my whole immune system was so low that my body just couldn't handle the virus. Hence why I ended up in hospital. Before that, I was a professional dancer, which you and I bonded over. I danced at the Moulin Rouge in Paris, and I did some acting and TV presenting. But for me, that was always not, it wasn't my truth. I mean, it was something that I enjoyed. And for the 2 years leading up to when I landed in hospital, was getting all of these warning signs and nudges from the universe to kind of stop and slow down, but I ignored them. And the universe gave me a nice big giant wake up call. Um, so that's how I've kind of got to where I am today.
But talking about writing a book, up until now, you haven't, like, this is your first book, as I understand. So, what sort of inspired you to actually start that epic process of actually putting everything that you've learned and putting all of your journey into words that you can share with everyone? And how did you go about making that happen once you had the idea?
I love words so much. I love writing. It's such a big passion of mine. I have written two ebooks. One was called 12 Steps to Wellness, and the other is called The Glow Kitchen. And I obviously write on my website, on my blog every week. And I started sharing 6 years ago. I just started sharing all of this information that I was learning and discovering about myself. And I had all of these insights and aha moments. And a few years down the track, I was like, I just need to home all of this information in one container. And I didn't really know what that looked like. I was kind of like, is it a program? Is it a product? Like, what is it? And it just kept on coming to me. No, it's a book. It's a book. It's a book. And I was like, okay, I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know what it's going to be called. I just know that everything is going to come together in this one container. And then I just started the journey. I made a decision that I was going to write a book, and I did a book outline and a proposal, and then away it went, and it flowed quite effortlessly. The words just came. I guess when you have everything sitting there bubbling, that the process is quite effortless.
And how long ago was this? How long has the whole idea of mastering your mean girl been in the works?
The writing process started about a year and a half ago, and I went away on a little creative bender with my husband. He's a musician, so he was writing music down one end of the house, and I was writing my book down the other end. And I got a majority of the book out in the first 2.5 weeks. I wrote the first like 40,000 words, in the first couple of weeks. And that's because I did nothing else. Like, I wasn't doing anything else. I was just solely there to write. And when you create space in your life, you will be amazed at what you can actually get done. So I had a lot of space to write, and it poured out. Then I left it for a little while. I returned back to it for another week, like another intensive week where I just wrote and wrote and wrote again. And I finished the book in that process. I wrote like another 30,000 words, 30 to 40,000 words, and then began my editing process, like really my own process. And then you submit the manuscript to the publisher. Then they have their editor look at it, and then that comes back to you, and they give feedback or any little notes or questions that they might have, and then you submit that back, and then they send it back to you for one final approval, and you proofread it and make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. And that process takes a little while, going back and forth, and just making sure everything's all perfect. And then it's submitted and it's locked in, and then that has to be obviously quite a few months before the book actually comes out, so that they have time to send it off and get printed and made all pretty with all the images.
My next question was actually for those of us who aren't yet published authors, what sort of quirky things came up and on your journey to writing a book, and what were there any points that someone who hasn't written a book or probably won't write a book that came up in the journey? But actually all of that was really interesting, and I didn't even know that that was the process, and that it can be in such short bursts and then periods of nothing in between. Is there anything else kind of unusual about writing a book that you came across that you weren't expecting? Or
Not so much. I mean, some people, everyone's writing process is different. It's totally different. Some people write intensively for years, and they might only write an hour a day. And you know what? I love reading about other people's writing processes. I love it so much. And but you have to do what's right for you and what feels right for you. Like, Tim Ferriss, whom I admire, his writing process is very different to mine. He starts writing at 10 p.m. at night, and it's usually accompanied with some wine or coffee or, things like that. And I was like, well, maybe I should, my main girl was like, well, maybe you should write like that too. That didn't work for me. Like, that's not my process. For me, I woke up, I did my morning routine. I was sitting at my desk at like 7:30. I would write until lunchtime, not getting up. I would seriously only get up to go to the bathroom. I had no distractions, no phone, no internet. And then I would have lunch in the sun with my husband. And then I would go back to working on it from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock, and then I would break and I would check some emails and dinner, and then it was bed. So for me, that's the process that worked for me, and everyone is different. Some people just write in their everyday life. For me, there's too many distractions here for me to do that. Like, I've tried, and it's very, very distracting. I kind of like locking myself away and peace and quiet.
So you mentioned that your mean girl was talking to you in that time, and getting back to the content of your magical book, can you tell us a bit more about that concept of the mean girl, just so that none of us think that there's a Lindsay Lohan running around in the book?
Totally. So your mean girl is that voice inside your head. The one that says you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not flexible enough, you're not smart enough, fast enough, whatever enough. And some people call that voice the ego, the inner critic, the smaller self, the voice, whatever. There's so many different names. For me, the mean girl is so powerful because I can actually visualize her. I'm a very visual person. I can see her, what she looks like. I can feel her energy, the way that she is. So for me, that really resonates, and it resonates with so many other women as well. So that voice is always going to be there. It's part of us. The ego is part of us, but it's not your truth. And this is what I teach in the book. Your truth is love. That core essence of who you truly are, not what your mean girl tells you.
Do you, even now you're living your truth and you're happy in every area of your life is going how you want it to be and you're passionate about it, do you still struggle with your mean girl coming back to throw you into fear or uncertainty? And to give us a sneak peek, what are your top tips for the ongoing maintenance now that you've mastered her? How do you maintain that?
Yeah, absolutely. She does still pop up. Don't get me wrong. She absolutely does still pop up. But now I have the tools to quickly come back into my heart. Where in the past, she would pop up and she would hang around for 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades. Now I have the tools and the techniques to really put her back in her place and come back down into my heart. I have a little 3-step mastering your mean girl process, which I can talk you through before until people can get their hands on a book. There's a little 3-step process, and the first step of the process of mastering your mean girl is awareness. Once you are aware of the things that she tells you, and when she pops up, they are no longer dark. You can't unknow what you already know. So you have shone light on it, it's no longer dark. And maybe you've got a couple of really strong mean girl comments. Like maybe it's, you're never going to get that raise, or you're not smart enough to write a book, or whatever it is. Once you are aware, that is key. The second step is gently closing the door on her. So, like an annoying salesperson that comes to your front door, knocking on your door, trying to sell you something, instead of like letting them in and coming and having dinner with you and sleeping in your bed and wearing your clothes and letting you hang out for a couple of weeks or even years, gently close the door on them. It's like, thank you, but no thank you. Thank you, mean girl, for your comment, but no thank you. So awareness is the first step. Gently closing the door on her is the second step. And the third step is choosing love instead. So this is where a lot of people get stuck. They are aware of it. They gently close the door on it, and then they're kind of like, well, but they're kind of like opening the door a little bit, then shutting it a bit, and then opening the door, and they're like, I just don't like, I don't know, but you've got to be courageous and close that door and then come back down into your heart instead. So for me, because I've been practicing this for so many years, I am quicker and quicker at going through that 3-step process. I'm very, very quick at it now. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It does absolutely happen. I just get quicker and quicker the more and more I practice it.
So one thing that I can imagine our mean girl is quite has a really big impact on is self-esteem. And I think that's a really, really big thing today, especially now that social media makes it so easy to access pictures of other people's lives. And obviously we always put our best foot forward. It's easy to think that other people's lives are perfect and really glamorously breezy and easy. And how do you sort of stay grounded among all that, information out there that either you're looking into other people's lives and thinking, oh my gosh, they've got it so made, or you're the one who, other people are looking at you and sometimes only seeing the good parts of that. How do you sort of navigate that social media world and stay grounded?
I think knowing when the awareness when the mean girl pops up is really important. That's really imperative. So again, being aware of, if you're looking through something and you're feeling like, oh, wow, they're perfect, or the other way around, being aware of that dialogue is imperative. For me, I personally make sure that everyone knows that I absolutely do still have a mean girl. I do. And if anyone tells you that they don't, run for the hills, sister, because they're lying. Because everyone does have an ego. Yes, differing varies of loudness that she's on. For me, many years ago, she was on volume 10 with a very heavy bass. And now I've been able to master her, put her on mute. Yes, she pops up, but I'm able to move through that a lot quicker. So I think being aware of the things that trigger you, and also being conscious of the word perfect. Like, what the hell is perfect? Someone please tell me. And if you know a perfect human being, can you please show me? I'd like to meet them because I don't know what that is. Yeah. Thank you. That's very sweet. But everyone's definition of perfect is different. And this is the thing, like everyone's definition of success is different. And that's really important. Like, don't strive to be perfect. Just strive to be the best you, whatever that looks like. Don't worry about striving to compete or, be perfect. Just focus on being the best version of you. That's all you can do. That's all I strive for. I'm not trying to compare myself to anyone else or to be like anyone else. I get inspired by other people. Absolutely. I'm like, wow, look at what she's doing with her business. Oh my gosh, she's so amazing. I'm so inspired. I don't compare myself anymore. I look at it as inspiration and use it as fuel to feed me. But then I come back to, okay, well, what can I learn from that person? And how can I implement that into my life so that I can be an even better version of myself? I'm constantly working on how I can be a better version of me. It's like a work of art that you're sculpting. You're always sculpting it. You never get to a point where it's finished.
It was really reassuring to read in the book that you have also hit rock bottom at some stage in your life, and that people don't just come out of the womb having everything together and live their life like that and then just have all this knowledge. You have the knowledge that you share in your book because you've been through that yourself and you've had to learn the lessons and build yourself up. And I too have had a similar experience where I was at rock bottom, and it was also involved a hospitalization, and it's always a health crash and burn kind of situation. But when you're in that the deepest, darkest places that you've ever been, that's probably when it's the hardest to pull yourself out of it, especially when you didn't have the tools that you now have. So what was your best advice to someone who's taking the first steps to pulling themselves out when it's the hardest, and when you do look in the mirror and see cold sores everywhere, or you do realize that you can't lift your head without assistance and that kind of thing? How do you what's the first step to drawing yourself out?
It's a really good question. When I was in hospital, and it was honestly darkest, hardest point in my entire life, there was this tiny, like literally tiny, tiny pinhead, tiny glimmer of hope that was deep within me. I didn't know what it was at the time, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but there was like this deep, deep hope that everything was going to be okay. And even though it was so horrible and I was, on antidepressants and really struggling, it was just this like, it's going to be okay. So following that feeling, even if you are in the darkest of dark hours, trying to connect back in here into that beautiful heart of yours. And even if it's only a tiny, tiny, tiny pinhair of hope or courage or glimmer, just stay connected to that. That is what is going to pull you out. That light is what is going to pull you out of that downward dark spiral. And just stay connected to that. Keep following that, and just let her go on her rants, but just follow that, and it will slowly start to get easier and easier. You've got to put one foot in front of the other, though. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So we need to put those steps and those wheels in motion. Otherwise, no one's going to do the work for us. If I could, I would do the work for everybody, but I can't. We have to do it ourselves, unfortunately. We have to do it, and fortunately, we have to do it for ourselves. I remember I was having a moment with my little brother when he was going through a really hard time many years ago. And he said to me, I wish I just didn't know all of this stuff. Why did you have to teach me all this stuff? And he was very great. He's very worthy of learning it really young. Like he started reading spiritual texts when he was like 17, 18 years old. and he started opening himself up to this world at 18. And he said, "Why did you have to teach me all this stuff? Why do I have to know all this stuff?" And I said, "You don't mean that." And he's like, "No, I don't mean that." But it just means you have to take self responsibility. No one's going to do the work for you. You have to be deeply committed to yourself and to being wanting to be the best version of you. That's what's going to pull you out.
And once you did discover self love and start to practice it more actively and understand it, did you find that people like your brother, but also friends and family, did you find that the people around you adapted with you, or did you have to adjust the people that you chose to surround yourself with to align more with the new you? And tell us a bit about surrounding yourself with the right people, both in your romantic relationships and your friendships.
Yeah, it's a really common question that I get asked. And for me personally, when I started to embark on this self discovery journey, there were people that did come with me, and there were that people that fell away, and that's okay, that's life. Remember, as I talk about in the book, everyone is always seeking unity. So whether you are here and someone is here, both of you are going to try and seek a unified position and same either way, whatever, wherever you are. People are always trying to seek unity. So that's something that's really important to remember. The second thing I wanted to mention was, when you first embark on this journey and you want to be the best version of yourself, it's very, very easy to want to preach to everyone and want them to come on this journey with you. You want them to eat kale smoothies. You want them to dry body brush. You want them to meditate and try yoga and matcha. And, you want them to really get on board because you love it and you're excited about it. But that is the quickest way to ruin a relationship. The best way that you can inspire someone else is by being the living, breathing, walking, talking, living example of what you were preaching. And that for me, when I first started, I so desperately wanted my parents to really change their diet and stop drinking. But it got to a point where they had to sit me down and say, "You've got to stop shoving this down our throat." Literally and figuratively. So you got to stop shoving the kale smoothies and the quinoa down our throat. And not really. And mum would say to me, like, "Darling, it's enough is enough. Just let us be." And I was like, "You know what? You're so right. I'm just going to let you be." And when I let them be and stood back and just let them and led by example, guess what happens? It didn't happen overnight, but a year later, I'm getting phone calls going, "Darling, how do I cook this quinoa business? What do I do?" And I was like, "Whoa, you're cooking quinoa? This is amazing." And then, my dad would say to me, "Darling, I tried one of your guided meditations and it's really helping me sleep." And I'm like, "It's amazing. Like, go, Dad." And I didn't even know that they were really following what I was doing. Like, my parents just know how to email. Like, we're talking, they're just getting into the internet now. So I didn't even know, I didn't even realize, but it was affecting them just by me being the living, breathing, talking, walking example of what I believe. I've inspired them. And that's all we can do.
You were just talking about how they don't use email or the internet that much. One thing that I really like about the book is that every few pages or every few chapters, there are little like inspo action and little lists or like a self-love permission slip. There's a lot of physical places where you can write things down as affirmations or just to keep yourself accountable that aren't sort of typing it into a document or putting it in your notes in your phone. Do you find that that's an important part of the whole process, writing things down physically? And I put post-its on the mirror, for example, or physically put things around me. Has that worked for you, and do you recommend it?
Absolutely. It is such an imperative part of mastering your mean girl. For me, helping yourself along the journey is imperative. I have reminders that pop up in my phone. I have post-it notes all over my house. On my fridge, I have these pens that I can write on my bathroom mirror. So I write, and we have glass all around our house. Like we have big windows, and we write on the glass, and it comes off. But we have beautiful quotes and affirmations everywhere around our house, because it helps support me on my journey. So do the things that are going to support you. If vision boards work for you, do that. If mantras, affirmations, whatever it is, put those things in place, because they're going to help you on your journey. And there's something so powerful about putting pen to paper. Just saying it isn't enough, or just typing it isn't enough. Actually putting it out, that's why I have all of those spots throughout the book where you can really dive deep into it.
One of the main things that I now have plastered everywhere from the book is to stop the glorification of busy, which has become such a big theme today. But it seems like you've released a book, you must be busier than you've ever been. But I loved that you said that not taking time out for yourself is actually doing yourself and everyone else a disservice. Even though you're being busy to get everything done, it's actually counterproductive, because half the time you're not doing it properly because you're grumpy or you're tired, and you have this idea of your daily hour of love. So what is that? Can you tell us a bit about what that is for you and how you incorporate that into your life?
Yeah, like I mentioned in the book, we wear busyness like a badge of honor these days, and for me, it's not about that. I don't want to glorify busy. I feel sorry for those people who are completely run off their feet. It kind of shows me that they're a little bit unorganized. We're all busy. Like everyone has to-do lists as long as the Thames. Seriously, we all have stuff going on. So it's not a competition of who's the most busy. Like for me, I prefer to use the word full. That has a little bit of a nicer ring to it, and it doesn't have a negative connotation. So for me, yes, my life is full, but it's full because I've chosen for it to be full right now. And I have an hour of love in the afternoons, usually. Like I'm going to do it after this interview. I'm going to go for a walk in nature. I'm going to sit in the sun, because if I don't take that time for me every day, like you said, I'm not filling myself up. And how can I show up to my work, to my family, to my stepson, to my friends, if I'm not the full version of me? So it's so imperative that we fill ourselves up. And I know mothers really struggle with this. I've seen it so many times with my clients, and also, I'm a stepmom 50% of the time, so I know what it's like. But in order for you to be the best mum, the best boss, the best wife, the best girlfriend, the best sister, friend, whatever, you have to be full. And you need to do the things that fill you up so that you can show up as the best mum, as the best sister. I know when I snap or I'm cranky at Leo, it's because I haven't taken time for me, or I'm tired, or I'm, stressed or overwhelmed. And I can catch it very quickly now. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I've got to go. I've got to go just have a walk. I've got to go sit on the balcony. I've got to take some breaths. I've got to have a cup of tea in the sun. It doesn't have to take an hour. If you've only got 3 minutes, all it takes is 3 deep mindful breaths, and you can literally change the biochemistry in your body.
Coming from a law background where being busy is actually like a badge of honor, and now being in a position where I'm able to not be like that and kind of attend all the exciting things and be people facing and pursue my passions, I find it really hard to say no now. So how do you manage that now that I'm sure everyone wants a piece of you all the time, and particularly when it's good things that you want to keep doing? How do you deal with like the FOMO that happens?
It's a really good question. For me, when you have your vision and your mission strong at the forefront of your mind, it's very easy to stay on your path. But when you aren't clear of your why or your purpose in life, that's when these little distractions can pull you off your path. So for me, every time an interview request comes in, or a speaking opportunity comes in, or a dinner, or a holiday with friends, or anything that comes into my realm, I ask myself, is this aligned to my purpose? Is this aligned to my vision? Does it feel true for me? If the answer is yes, then I'll say yes. If the answer is no, I say no. But that doesn't mean at the start of this career for me, I did say yes to everything. I was building up my business, and I was building up the awareness around me and my brand and my message. But that was also because I wasn't crystal clear on my mission. So now I'm so clear on what my mission in this world is, that when things come into my realm, it's very easy for me to say yes or no, thank you. And it doesn't mean you're going to miss out on an opportunity. Well, maybe, but you then create space for something else to come in. So if we're constantly people pleasing and saying yes all the time, even when it's not our truth, we then take up space for maybe something another magical thing that was trying to come in but couldn't come in, because you've taken up all this space saying yes to all these things that were kind of sort of maybe your truth. So it's really important that we reconnect in and make sure that everything that we say yes to is part of our journey, part of our path, and our truth.
You talk a lot about having a healthy relationship with food and how eating can be affected by other areas of our lives and how we're feeling and our emotions. Tell us your food story, where you've come from and where you're at now.
So I used to have a very, very destructive relationship with food and my body. And I grew up with no nutritional knowledge whatsoever. I drank red cordial, McDonald's, chips, lollies, anything. My breakfast was Cocoa Pops and light milk, and I just had no idea. And my parents just didn't really know either, and that's not their fault. That was just the knowledge and awareness that they had at that time. So I lived off junk food and thought I was kind of healthy because I'd have like tofu and sweet chili, low fat sweet chili sauce, and light mocha frappuccinos from Starbucks, and thought that was really healthy too. And it wasn't until I was 20 and I went to the Moulin Rouge in Paris that I started to witness all of these beautiful Amazonian goddess-like women look in the mirror and call themselves fat and ugly. And it planted a seed within me. And that's where my destructive eating habits started. And I did very, very silly things that I'm still paying for with my body. And I really tortured my temple. And that went on for about 4 or 5 years until I ended up in hospital. And I realized when I was in hospital that the way I was treating my body was not serving my highest good. And I had to relearn everything. Then I went and studied holistic health coaching and nutrition, and really dove deep into understanding how to really nourish my body. And that was obviously 6 years ago, and I'm still learning. I am reading. I am obsessed with health and nutrition. I am constantly reading books, listening to podcasts, and watching videos and documentaries just to educate myself more and more about this. I think why people make poor choices with food is because there's a lack of education. Because when you really know what gluten and commercial dairy and refined sugar and processed packaged foods and factory farm animal products are actually doing to your body, you would not touch them. When you really, really are fully educated, you know the science, you know the ins and outs of what it's actually doing to you, you wouldn't go near it.
So nowadays, what's your typical day on a plate? Like, what would be breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks? other than our matcha, which I know you adore?
Oh, love. I love, love, love. I share my food philosophy in the book, as you know, and I'm always a little bit reluctant to share exactly what I eat because I think it's another way that women compare themselves. But I'll give you a little rundown. In the mornings, I usually have, at the moment, and this changes all the time. So at the moment, I am having a fatty latte. Now, let me tell you what a fatty latte is. I have this recipe in my ebook, The Glow Kitchen, and the fatty latte is a warm drink that has just got so much fat in it, saturated fat, and it honestly keeps me full till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's got like coconut oil, MCT oil, a teaspoon of ghee. It sometimes has matcha. It's got some herbs, some teas in it, some turmeric, some stevia, um, all sorts of fun little things. And I've created quite a nice one now. And most people will be thinking, God, that sounds disgusting, but it's actually beautiful. It's almost like a turmeric latte, and it's so good. It's just delicious. So I usually have that at the moment. Sometimes I have eggs and avocado, just depends what I feel like. And then for lunch, it's usually like protein and vegetables and salad. Like, lots of my plate is full of vegetables and salads and mixture of raw and cooked, whatever I'm feeling like, and a bit of protein. And then dinners is the same. Dinners is like some protein and vegetables and salad. I love slow cooked lamb. It's like my favorite food on the planet. Like, if I could eat it every day, I would. But my husband's like, you're going to turn into a lamb, and if you don't stop eating it. And all of our produce is organic, grass-fed, chemical-free. Everything that we buy is just of the highest quality and purest form. We shop at the farmers markets because I know exactly what's going into the produce, and I know how they've created it, and that they don't use any chemicals or pesticides or herbicides. So for me, that's really important. I'm a qualitarian, I like to call it.
Such a nice word. You also talk about how it's not just what you eat, but also what you drink. And you are one of those not so common people like myself who actually don't drink alcohol at all anymore. So tell us a bit about how that transition has been, what you used to be like, what you're like now, if there have been any challenges, and how you're feeling about the decision now.
I honestly love it. I think it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. And when I was in hospital, the doctors plonked this big tray of drugs in front of me, from antidepressants, antivirals, antibiotics, anti this, anti that, and whatever. And they kind of plonked this in front of me, and they said, you've got to take all of this indefinitely. And I was like, no, 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 there's got to be another way. And then that's when my journey of discovery in holistic nutrition and health started, because I was like, there's got to be another option. Like, there has to be another option. I knew enough to know that that can't be good for you. So I knew in that moment I had to sort my health and my life out. I decided to stop drinking to get my health back on track. Like, I was so weak. I couldn't even get out of bed. I had chronic fatigue. I was so unwell. I had, like, not only that, I had eczema all over my body. I had pimples, and my skin was just breaking out in hives. So I needed to really sort my health out. So I just said, look, I'm just going to stop drinking for a while and see how I feel. And it was very difficult at the start. Very, very difficult. I didn't know how to be in a social situation. I drank before that to give myself confidence. I would have to always have a drink before I went out to give me the confidence to walk into a bar. And I didn't know how to be. I was very awkward, didn't know how to socialize without a drink. But I kept on just doing it because I had no choice. And I was on antibiotics anyway, so I kind of I had no choice. But I started to feel better. And I was like, okay. And it was a combination of everything I was doing. Yes, I understand that. I was really looking after myself. But I just started to feel better. And I was like, okay, well, I'm feeling so good that I'm just going to keep going and keep going. And that was 6 years ago. And I've not had a drink since, and I don't have any desire, and I don't feel like I've missed out at all. For me, like, it just doesn't, it's never been something that I've enjoyed. Like, my husband, on the other hand, he doesn't drink as well either. And but he's like, he appreciates like a really beautiful biodynamic organic red wine. When we're in Italy, like, he had a few sips of one, and when he's with his dad, he might have a couple of sips. But he's like, don't you, can't you appreciate it? And I'm like, well, I'd rather eat some raw loving earth chocolate. Like, really? Like, or I'd rather make matcha balls and eat those. Like, if I'm going to indulge, like, I'd rather eat that. That's more enticing for me. I'd rather make like a blueberry sorbet or something, and put cacao nibs and all this delicious stuff in it. That intrigues me a lot more. But some people love a glass, and that's cool. What I would say is, make sure you're doing it from a place of love. And one of the main chapters of my book at the very start is choosing love over fear, which we spoke about before. Make sure you are drinking from a place of love. Like, if you want to go out and let your hair down and do head spins on the tables with your girlfriends, and you can't wait, and it's from a place of love, go for it. But if you're doing it because you're going because you're scared they won't ask you next time, or you're scared of missing out and you don't really want to go, and you know that you've got to get up early for this exam tomorrow, and really the whole process feels icky, but you're going to go and do it anyway, then I would say don't do it. And remember that every time you ignore your intuition, there's always a consequence. There's always a price to pay every time we ignore that intuition. So really follow what feels true for you in every moment. And if having a beautiful glass of biodynamic organic red wine feels good for you, go for it. Enjoy every single moment. Have an experience with it. Savor every single moment of it. But if it's not your truth, don't do it.
I find that when your truth doesn't necessarily align with someone else's truth, like around the alcohol thing, for example, it's come out to a few people that I don't drink anymore, and they kind of get uncomfortable that that you don't drink and they do, and then it all becomes sometimes a bit critical of people, like why they're doing something and all that kind of thing. And how do you find there's obviously with a budding profile comes criticism and haters. I mean, I sort of think that haters and competitors are a sign that you're doing well. So you haven't actually made it until you have one, and you've got to learn to see it as a positive thing. But how do you cope with that if any criticism ever comes your way?
There's a couple of things that I love about Brene Brown's work. I don't know if you've read any of her work, and she's such an inspiration to me. But she always says that unless you are in the arena, and unless you are putting yourself out there, you have no ability to give me any feedback. You have no right to give me any feedback. And for me, if some random stranger writes some comment, like, and is being a bit of a negative Nancy on my website or on my social media, for someone to go to that much effort, they must be really struggling with their mean girl. And I remind myself of that. But if, say, my husband gave me feedback, or my best friend, or my mum, then I would listen with open ears and I would take it on board. But if it's some random stranger who I've never met before, who doesn't know me from a bar of soap, and tries to say something to me, it's really important that you don't take that as Bible. You don't take that on, because you have to remember that every single person is on different operating systems. Everyone is dealing with their own stuff. You don't know what's going on for that person. Like, that person could have just lost their cat, or could have just found out that their mum is in hospital. You just don't know. And then you were the one in the firing line. You just don't know. So for me, it really, it's sometimes I have a giggle, and sometimes I go, ooh, that stung a little bit. But when it stings, there's something in it for me. So there's something in it for me, and I'll look at it and I'll be really honest with myself, and whatever it is, I will look at that. But most often I feel quite neutral. Like it doesn't bother me anymore. People are always going to have their opinion, um, and that's okay. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and for someone to go to the effort to write something negative on someone else's blog or page or social media, it shows me that they're probably struggling a lot with their mean girl right now.
Well, I don't understand how anyone can be a hater of you or the book. It is an absolute pleasure to read, and as you can see from how much I have just tabbed the hell out of it, it is full of words of wisdom, and it's just something that I would really highly recommend to anyone, even guys, because I'm sure guys also have a mean boy. Perhaps they're not as verbal about it, but I think it's an amazing read for anybody and everybody, with tips for like your personal life, but also business, and it applies to everything. So it's a very, very holistic, covers everything. It covers money and friends and relationships and exercise and food and wellness. So where can everyone get their hands on it?
You can head to masteringyourmeangirl.com and you can grab your copy right now. I'm so excited. And like you said, the dudes, they do struggle with this as well. They have a bad boy. And, it's terminology that my husband and I use all the time. He'll be like, was that your mean girl just then? And I'll be like, oh, yeah, it was. And I'll say the same thing. I'm like, yeah, is that your bad boy speaking? And he's like, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And it just gives it a really great little perspective shift to come back down into your heart. So give this as a gift, whether it's for Christmas or birthdays, give this to your sisters because they will love you for it. And give them something that is really going to inspire beautiful change within them. Don't give them, a toxic nail polish. Give them something that they can actually really benefit from. And yeah, and you can head to my website, masteringyourmeangirl.com, and grab that straight away and let me know what you think of it.
Thank you so much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure, and everyone get your hands on the book.
Thank you, beautiful girl. It's been amazing to connect with you.